Hey, everybody, and welcome to Pete Carroll Was Right, the confusingly named Alabama football live show. As always, it's Carter, Ben, and Mitch here to talk all things Alabama football with you. Coming off a disappointing performance against A&M, they didn't cover the spread for the first time all year, which is just what a letdown. What a disappointment.
Jimbo treated the game like it was a scrimmage or something.
I think Jimbo definitely had some of that $100 million on his boys to cover, so I think that might have been part of it.
Yeah, that timeout at the end. Although, I don't know, people made a big deal about that, but I don't really blame him, right? Like, Saban kind of preaches the same thing, right? 60 minutes, no matter what the score is, just keep playing, and I feel like that's like a product of that. I don't know. I didn't have an issue with it. What was that, Mitch?
It was less the timeouts and more like the field goals he kept kicking on 4th and short from.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Inside the 10 and then like the 50-yarder.
But that's his thing, right? Like that was the big criticism of him at Florida State, I think, is that he just didn't understand fourth down math. He never went for it on fourth down. He would always kick the field goal or punt. So like you kind of like really see that like firsthand here. Like he just had no interest in, I don't know, being like aggressive. And you would think like this, if there was ever a time to be aggressive, it's now in this game when like you need to like make a whole bunch of plays to pull the upset, but just didn't happen that way for them. What did you guys have any general impressions about it? I know we just talked about how we're gonna do like a sort of like a season review to date sort of thing, but just did you guys have any general impressions from the A&M game?
I think, obviously we are going to talk about the running game somewhat in detail, both as part of this game and the A&M game in general. I would think, and you tweet about this some, like in terms of the, things that went wrong and like what was the deal. But I would just tell anyone who's they finally had, we went 4 weeks with being all excited about Tua in the passing game. And I feel like some Bama fans' inner like old school gump is starting to pop back up where they're just like the lack of running is getting to them,
Yeah.
I'd say pull back from the ledge because like, they threw for 387 yards in 3 quarters.
Yeah.
And like, you just don't need, when you're throwing the ball that well, the running game is a complementary piece.
Right.
I mean, this Alabama team is like an NFL type offense. Like you pass to set up the pass and then you run to kill the game at the end. Like You really just, when you're this good at quarterback and receiver, like it just, and like Saban said, they were loading the box a lot. And they did some more of the stuff you had pointed out before where they just weren't changing plays at the line. And obviously there are some problems like, Alex Leatherwood is like the lowest graded offensive lineman on the team. And there were some mistakes. Certainly they can play better in the running game, but this is not a cause for panic.
So let's here's what I was thinking. Saban asked us to be critical of the team. He very explicitly he said that very explicitly. He said he called on the media to be critical of the team. We'll be generous and consider ourselves media in the loose definition. So we will abide by coach's orders.
Or more like what was it Kevin Durant that called out the blog boys? We're kind of like blog boy, like podcast boys, I guess. But
there we go. So I say let's do it. So Carter totally agreed that about just generally speaking about how like A, there's no reason to panic about the run game just in general, and B, with this team, with the quarterback, with the wide receivers, the tight end, the running game is more of a complementary piece for the first time in quite a while with Alabama. But there are some issues with the run game, and you alluded to them. You mentioned a couple. There are some legitimate issues. So I thought it would be good if we sort of tried to lay all of those out, like not just sort of apropos of A&M, but also just speaking generally. Where are our concerns with the running game? Because I think there are some.
Yeah. it just, for me, it ultimately comes down to like, is the right side of the line and Alex Leatherwood in particular at right guard, are they going to like get comfortable in their roles?
Right.
Like, everyone else is going to have issues at times. And like, we've talked plenty on here before about how Pierce Baker is not the most like,
there's a strength issue there, right?
Yeah,
there's like a strength and power issue that when he goes against, because like going this week, like Dalen Mack, like that's a tough matchup. Like that's a good player. That's a big player. So yeah, so that's one. And right. So back to the right side that you were saying.
Yeah. And it's just going to take time. And, you pointed out a couple weeks ago, they on the RBR podcast, Brad and Wesley had Cole Kubelik on there, and he was talking about that these days, like the position that suffers the most from losing two-a-days in fall camp and having less contact in fall camp is the offensive line. Right. And so particularly, and you have that to consider, and you've got only one guy on the team playing the same offensive line position he played last year, and you've got a guy in Leatherwood who I don't think ever played guard in his life. So it's just, we would have loved for this to sort of get better sooner, and the talent is still there. So I think it'll get there. It's just going to take more time than maybe we had hoped for to begin with.
Mitch, what about you? Any issues with the run game beyond? So I think Carter's point is Carter's example is the most prominent, which is really the right side of the line play. And I would specifically point to the center right guard combo, because I think Jedrick has been pretty good run blocking so far. So I really think it's sort of the center and the right guard. And with the center, it's he knows his assignments really well. He has a real good understanding of the scheme, but there is some bit of a talent issue. And with the right guard, it's kind of the opposite, right? There's no talent issue, but it's more of just getting used to a totally new position that he's only been playing for like a month at this point, maybe like 5 weeks. So that's probably the biggest issue. But what else? Would you highlight anything else?
Not really. I think we saw a lot of east to west this week that didn't go very well.
So east to west in terms of design, or east to west in terms of the play of the backs?
A little of both, but probably more so design.
Okay. I thought the backs left some yards on the field. Not a ton of times, but I thought that there were a few carries for Damien maybe where he left some yards on the field. Najee left some yards on the field on one outside zone where I feel like he's just not quite grasping just how decisive you have to be when you make that cut. So I thought, the offensive line got all the criticism for the bad run game against A&M, but I thought the backs kind of like low-key contributed a little bit to that and didn't exactly have their best performance.
Yeah, I don't think it was Damien's best game. And I think Najee, like, it's a nitpick thing because he's still so talented, and, whatever move he decides to put on a guy or whatever he decides to do, he's going to get yards plenty of times, and he's generally doing well. But I do think he is not quite decisive enough at times. I think he really needs to work on kind of focus on being more of a one-cut guy and really getting downhill with as big and as fast and as powerful as he is. Like, I think that's something that needs to be kind of a focus for him.
Is there a former Alabama running back that he maybe reminds you of in terms of sometimes the lack of decisiveness with his cuts, and maybe sometimes the rounding of his cuts, the fact that it's not as quick twitch? Like, is there and like, body type and everything? Because like I'm watching this and I'm thinking,
you're thinking Derrick Henry?
I'm thinking like 2014 Derrick Henry.
Pre-2015 Derrick Henry, when he was when like his cuts and his vision were maybe not as advanced as they were in 2015. And when he was always like, that was one of the things he got really good at during that year and has gotten even better at with the Titans, actually, is just taking what's there. Like Derrick in 13 and 14 was always trying to bounce it outside and hit the home run. And it's like, dude, you're like
Yeah.
6'4", 230. Like,
Yeah.
just like crack some skulls, man. Like hit the hole and bring the power. Like you don't have to try to hit a 50-yard touchdown on every run.
That and the quick twitchiness of his cuts, I thought was like one of the biggest improvements I've seen from an Alabama player between like, and I feel like that kind of got ignored, right? Like with Derek, it was the narrative was sort of just, oh, well, he was finally a featured back. He finally got the opportunity. So he was amazing. But I thought it was more than that. And like, I know that was the first year we did the show and we talked about it a lot. And at the time that he really made a huge leap as just as an individual performer. And, maybe Najee's, maybe that's still to come for Najee. Right. But like, would you say he's the third back right now?
Yeah, it certainly seems like it.
Mitch, what about you? What do you see for the high?
Although he's actually, I think he has the most yards on the team, actually.
Yeah, which is
I think
interesting.
He's usually the he's like Damien's backup, and then they just use Jacobs in different ways.
Right, but beyond just their usage, do you like what do you personally consider to be the hierarchy of the backs?
Is it still, I mean, probably third. Just in terms of effectiveness right now.
Yeah, I mean, Damien number one, definitely.
Yeah, but Damien's probably the clear number one in every facet of the game right now. Yeah. And Josh is sort of I don't know, just because the way they use him is different enough. Like, I think the combination of his skills kind of puts him ahead of where Najee is right now.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was just looking at some of Najee's numbers. He had one really big game, right? Was it Arkansas State? Yes, it was Arkansas State. He 13 rushes for 135 yards. So that's gonna be a big boost.
We'll do it, yeah.
Anything else with the running game? I mean, certainly there's something here about the play calling not exactly being designed to optimize their per play productivity, right? Like clearly there are some other goals in mind. And I think you saw that at times on Saturday where it was like, they really shouldn't be running the ball. And I'm sure they know they shouldn't be running the ball, but they're going to run the ball anyway because they want to get better at running the ball, right?
Yeah. Against teams with talent.
Right. And so I think that was it. They're still not really letting Tua change plays. I also thought A&M did a good job. Right?
Yeah.
They did a good job. They did a good job kind of stacking the box late, right before the snap. A lot of times, like bringing that extra run defender up there kind of at the last minute. So, it was just a combination of things. What are see, the thing is though, is that the run game should be great. Right?
Yeah.
Like objectively it should be because they should run it when the team is going out of their way to respect the pass, which teams should be forced to do a lot against Alabama. And Alabama's linemen are really talented. Their backs are really talented. Their tight end blocks really well. Like, it should be awesome. And I still think it will be, personally.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is that it was weird that Saban talked about that A&M loaded the box, and they kind of did, like, not 100% of the time, but it's weird to me that with this team that anyone would be selling out to stop the run. Like, maybe early in the season, but now you've got enough tape on Tua that, like, that would be the strategy against Alabama in the past, no question. But, like, are you going to take that risk now?
So this is actually, I think this is actually sort of a segue into a really interesting conversation to sort of move beyond A&M and even to move beyond just the first 4 games and to sort of look ahead for the rest of the season. How would you play Alabama as an opposing defense?
Pray.
Yeah. Mitch, what do you think?
Well, I mean, what kind of if I've got like LSU?
Yeah, that's the thing, right? I think that's the first qualifier. we're not talking about some middle of the road defense or worse, because some middle of the road defense, no matter what they do, is going to get shredded by Alabama just because the talent discrepancy is too big. But let's talk about a really good defense. Let's talk about like LSU or Auburn or Georgia. What are they going to do schematically against Alabama, do we think?
I mean, I think you've got to do what generally great NFL defenses have to do these days. What the Giants did in both Super Bowls against the Patriots is that you have to have a really great defensive front, and you have to send 4 guys after the quarterback and drop 7 into coverage. Yeah. And you have to hope that your guys up front can win enough battles to basically harass Tua into having an awful day. And you hope that with lots of guys flooding the back end, and you can maybe disguise your coverages a little bit, that you can bait him into being too aggressive and rushing some throws and making mistakes. Who's good enough to do that? Like maybe Clemson?
Yeah. Well,
maybe Ohio State.
Right. Well,
although Ohio State gives up a lot of big plays.
Yeah. I think, but see, if a team does that though, I think by the end of the year, I think Alabama's going to be able to run the ball. And if a team is showing a lot of split safety looks against Alabama by the end of the year, when this line has gotten experience together and has sort of gelled together, I don't think you can play split safety against Alabama, because I think they're going to run 5 or 6 yards of carry every time, and they're going to force you to bring that guy up. Like I don't see that.
You would just have to have you've got to be a Clemson or an Ohio State, and just have a defensive line that you can say, do everything up front.
Yeah.
Like that's the only chance you have.
Right. Or you just got to play cover 1 man, right? And just say your guys just got to be better than the other team's guys.
Yeah. Nobody's corners are that good. Literally nobody's corners are that good. I'm not like, this is something like, I think this was in the jumbo package on RBR this morning, and it was something like I haven't paid a ton of attention to Clemson yet this year outside of like the quarterback situation and stuff, but I knew they're like,
right.
They've recruited like 4 cornerbacks in the last like 3 classes, which is like,
yeah.
I don't understand how that happens.
So let's talk about LSU though, because LSU forever against Alabama has just played cover 1 man. They brought that extra guy in the box. They played cover 1 man, and they've just challenged you. They've just said, we're going to be better than you. They don't have, and they got some talent now, right? Like they have some talent at defensive back, and that's what they've always done. And that's what they're going to do in their home, and it helps to be home when you're going to sort of play that sort of like, high energy, like emotional type defense. And I think that's an interesting challenge. I'm not,
with LSU, I just like, okay, Greedy is fantastic. Greedy will shut down whoever he's on, but okay.
Greedy's so good.
Take Judy, or, I don't know if they play him to a side of the field or if they have him follow guys. Okay, take Jerry Judy out of the game. You still got Devontae and Ruggs and Jalen Waddle. And I don't think LSU's front is dominant enough to get consistent pressure on. Because, one of the things we talked about is like this offensive line has had a lot of potential to become maybe the best pass protecting line Alabama's had. And for whatever struggles they've had in the run game, they've been great in pass protection.
Right.
Tua didn't get sacked once against A&M.
I think he's
0 sacks.
Yeah. And Tua helps them out too.
He does. Yeah. So I think to consistently get pressure to the point where it's really going to affect Tua, you got to have a really dominant front. And I don't think LSU has that. And I think if you let him sit back there, he's going to pick you apart. I don't care. It doesn't matter how good your defensive backs are. And I don't think LSU has, outside of Greedy, the guys to shut down Alabama's receivers.
Yeah, if you took like Auburn's front with LSU's secondary, I mean, that might be a defense.
Yeah. Well, that's right. I mean,
Auburn has the secondary to really, like, with all they lost, like, I am watching them against some of these guys. I don't know. I thought really Auburn game was going to be one of the tougher games for them this year defensively.
Well, if Auburn's offense doesn't get it together, they're.
But that's the one thing Gus's teams usually improve, right? Like I talk about that a lot, and I really feel that that's true. And Gus gets a lot of shit from Alabama fans, but like I'm always impressed by how his team seemed to improve as the year goes on. And, 2013, 2015, 2017, like those teams got 2016, like those teams got significantly better as the year went on. And I think that's a real testament to Gus. And like right now, offense looks like crap because the line just looks like crap. But
the interior of their, I am going to really enjoy watching Quinnen Williams take on the interior of the Auburn offensive line. Because if it doesn't get significant, like they're bad right
That's
now.
tough. That's tough.
The tackles are fine.
Yeah.
The interior is bad.
That's a tough matchup against Alabama.
Yeah.
Somebody asked us a bunch of questions. Should we
let's get to those. Yeah.
Let's knock those off. All right. Here's the first one.
This is our friend Singapore Slang.
Yes.
Singapore Slang at Singapore Slang.
All right. The first one is the run game. Was that A&M scheme, bigger prom, off day? We kind of touched on that already.
Yeah, we touched on this.
Combination, right? A&M was being aggressive playing the run. There were some things that Alabama wasn't doing well between the line, between the backs not playing great, between the play calling not being sort of optimized for success, and then it was also just an off day, especially as it relates to the backs. I think it was kind of just an off day. Question 1B. Considering passing offenses are fairly variable, if Tua has an off night, how easy is it to revert back to a more run-heavy offense, or would they want to? And then follow up, how much of the run effectiveness is set up by a large diet of power running in the first half? If they pass heavy in the first half, can they easily switch to run heavy in the second half?
I don't think. I think really, their ability to, if they just decide to run it 45 times a game and pass 15 times, which is what they're going to do sometimes this year, because they're going to, Tua's going to throw 12 passes and get 3 TDs in there, and they're going to
go to the bench. Yeah.
I think all that's going to just come down to whether or not the offensive line gets mentally to where they need to be. I don't think it's an issue of like, I don't know. The backs are fantastic. Even the nitpicky things we've discussed here and there, the backs are good enough that if they give them the carries, they'll produce. As long as the offensive line continues to gel and continues to get better, then I don't think, if they needed to be in a situation where they really wanted to lean on the run game, I expect that. I don't think that'll be a problem going forward. As far as like I think the kind of the underlying concern behind the question is like, if you become too reliant on the passing game, like, the teams who just don't seem to really know how to run the ball because there's, or like Alabama teams have been in the past where they just aren't really good at passing because that's not what they do. I don't think that's not a concern for me. Like that, like it's like an identity issue. Like you've strayed so far away from your run identity that you can no longer go back. Yeah, I don't think
like Saban's even emphasized that after maybe like the Louisville game or something. He was talking about not wanting to lose like that identity with the running game.
And he's gone out of his way to say, like, when he's been asked about, like, well, how great is this offense, especially relative to previous offenses? He's always gone out of his way to say, well, we pass the ball really well. Yeah. But he's not. He always seems very careful not to compliment the whole offense. So clearly, like he's going out of his way to still say that he cares. Mitch, let me ask you this, because part of this question also asks, would they want to ever revert back to that offense? And I guess the question, if I could sort of reframe that a little bit, what would you need to see to want to revert back to that type of offense?
I mean, if there's just such a mismatch up front that they have, I don't know. Like
the only time I ever want to see it is the week following, on Sunday, you get a tweet from Charlie Potter that says like worst fears confirmed, like Tagovailoa ACL torn or something like that. That's the only, because if two is healthy, then there's no. I'm gonna knock on every bit of wood in my apartment. But if Tua is the guy, if he's out there on the field, there is no. Like it's the the principle that great NFL teams have. I'll go back to this again and again. If you have a passing game like this, just like if you have a passing game like this, you don't go away from it.
Right. And oh, sorry, go ahead, Mitch.
I was going to say, I just want to emphasize that it's not something I want to do either. But it's just if the question is just asking what it would take to do that, I just feel like it has to be just some sort of obscene mismatch in the front seven.
And you wouldn't see that against a really good opponent, right?
No.
Yeah.
So the only way that you would maybe want to revert to that against a really good opponent is if that really good opponent is just like, I remember like some of the defenses that teams used to play against, like the old Peyton Manning Colts, where they would just like routinely drop like 8 guys into coverage and play like 3 safeties deep over the top to just like funnel everything underneath. And that's when like Brandon Marshall had that like 25 catch game against them or something, like as a product of these ridiculous defensive strategies that just force short throws. So like short of one of these really good defenses coming out with some sort of strategy like that, which I think is probably unlikely because Tua is really good, but he's not Peyton Manning. Then I feel like there's just not a matchup. Like maybe when Alabama plays like, paycheck game or whatever, and you just want to take it easy, you just want to run the ball, whatever, work on your running game, then you maybe want to revert to it then. But in a game of actual importance, or in a game that they could lose or could actually be competitive, I agree with you guys. I can't see a scenario where that's possible. Let's see. Okay. So he asked us, do you notice any trouble with the linebackers and secondary getting off blocks? Seemed like Mon running broke free and second level was tied up a good bit. And then Hampton Sipper also at Bama fan 1815 also asked us, what do you think of the linebacker play, and should we try to get guys like Anoma and Latu more playing time? So I think we can sort of combine those questions into one and just maybe generally talk about the linebacker play and the run defense against Mond last Saturday. So and that was I saw a lot of hand wringing on Twitter. I saw as much hand wringing about the linebacker play on Twitter during that game and after that game as I did about the offensive line, maybe even more. And then Will Lowry had that tweet about how just the defensive performance was unacceptable, which, only emboldened, some folks. So what did you guys think about the linebacker play and about their ability to defend the run?
Okay, so the thing I would say is like basically A&M's entire offense on Saturday was spurred by those Kellen Mond scrambles. And if that's the only thing that's happening, then I'm really not going to like, if it's consistently happening and they're having like, if it's a Johnny Manziel game, right? And they're consistently, he's consistently breaking contain and getting huge runs, and he's also being a really effective passer, all right, then we'll worry about that. If that's the only thing that's working, and that was the only thing that was working for A&M on Saturday, then I'm not too concerned about it.
And there were like 4 of them, right? There was like 3 or 4. There was that one huge one to set up their first touchdown. He scored on one. There was another big one, and there was another like 15-yarder or something.
And really athletic quarterbacks are going to do that sometimes.
And some of those plays were just so well schemed.
Yeah.
And I don't, and specifically about the linebackers, I'm not sure they even had responsibilities for him.
So what did you? Yeah. Okay. So that's a good point. So okay. So let's put a pin in the tool, because I do want to go back to Jimbo and Mon for a sec in a minute, but to put a pin in that and go ahead, just talk specifically about the play of the Alabama linebackers. What did you think, Mitch, about how the linebackers played?
Well, I got to watch. I watched it live, and I got to watch the little 30-minute quick version of the game. And at least in terms of like the scrambling issue, I never thought it was really much up to them. There were definitely a couple of times where, like in dime, and like Dylan Moses was sitting there spying and easily kept it from scrambling.
Yeah.
Outside of that,
what about on some of the design run plays?
Yeah, so the design runs, there was one where Mac had trouble getting outside on a block. That's the only one off the top of my head that had a big criticism about.
I want to know Carter. I want to know where you come down on. So I will just sort of say that I thought that I thought the outside linebackers set the edge pretty well. I don't think there was much of an issue with that. Jimbo caught them with a couple really well schemed plays where they kind of knew that if they initially left the edge player unblocked, that he would crash in and they would kind of have somebody pull around and wash him out of the play to open up a hole. And that's not necessarily that's not really Alabama's fault. That's not like the scheme's fault or anything. It's just like they just caught them in like a bad play and they sort of read some tendencies, but it's not the player's fault.
Yeah.
I think there are times where Mac is a little late sometimes in diagnosing and reacting to plays maybe, and he kind of gets blocked out of plays by, especially like Mitch said, especially on outside runs. He kind of sometimes is like a split second late and he gets caught in the wash because of that.
Yeah. So I would say I haven't had time to review the game that extensively, and I was watching it at a bar, and for much of the second half I was rather intoxicated.
Just chilling.
So, yeah. So I would say, just in terms of like my broad impressions of the linebackers on this year, I think with Mac, you kind of have two issues, right? One is that I don't think he's full speed because of the foot.
Yeah.
And the other is that I think as a result of being in this role where he's the signal caller and he has to get everybody, like he's thinking a lot. And as a result, he's kind of a step slow, and that is kind of compounding and stuff that like he's like a beat slow to read and react to run plays. He hasn't been as good as maybe I would have hoped at kind of reading the wash in run plays and picking lanes and attacking those. And I think again, part of that is just sort of a like, he's not there in terms of just processing everything immediately and then making a decision the way the great Alabama inside linebackers like Reuben, for instance, I think is the prototype there.
Or CJ.
Yeah. I think that's just going to take a little time for him. And it may be a situation where, you know, not being fully healthy is affecting that as well, because maybe he's not as confident in himself physically as he might be otherwise. But I think that's just an experience thing for him. And I think that'll get better as the season goes on. And it wouldn't also, and this is stretching it out, it wouldn't sort of surprise me at this point if he, you know, as much buzz as he's gotten, to see him come back next year instead of declaring early. Because like you think about it, an Alabama inside linebacker actually hasn't left early since Dante Hightower. Like CJ and Reggie and Reuben all stayed for their senior years. And
even Dante was there for 4 years, right? But just one was like the medical red shirt.
He had another year of eligibility, but you know, he was there for 4 years. But it wouldn't surprise me to see him come back and want to show that he can be elite in that kind of signal caller role. But that's an aside. Yeah. So I think, you know, just to tie this back into our kind of season review thing, I don't think the inside linebackers have been as great as we have hoped, because, you know, I talked a lot about how, you know, this is kind of the most athletic pair they've had at inside linebacker. I think we underestimated how much of an adjustment that role was going to be for Mac. But again, I really think it's just an experience thing for him, and that'll get better and better as it goes on.
What do we think about Dylan Moses?
He's okay, right? I haven't heard.
Oh no, not a.
Oh
not
yeah.
Sorry, just in general. Like I was just asking because I hadn't heard.
Oh yeah, I think he's okay. He had media responsibilities early in the week, and I think he indicated that he's like a little sore or whatever. But
exactly. Yeah. Okay. That he was a little sore, but he'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. So Mitch, what did you make of Moses so far?
I feel like it's kind of the same for both guys. It's like this is a unique thing for Alabama's linebackers where neither guy
has any experience,
comes back with any kind of experience. And I don't know that it helps either one of them that the other doesn't have, you know, the experience either. So yeah, I mean, I would agree that they've been not to the standard that we've seen, but I feel like it's maybe should have been expected a little bit.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, I think Moses has played pretty well. Um, I guess really the concern with the inside linebackers is the run fills, right? It's the run fills. Less between the tackles and more sort of getting wide and reading and reacting to plays, but also some between the tackles. The good news, I think, is that the defensive line is playing really well. Really, like the defensive line might be playing as well as some of Alabama's best defensive lines, right? Like those guys are really getting after it.
Yeah, I mean, we've obviously talked ad nauseum about Quinnen, but yeah. I mean, he's, say what you will about PFF's grades, but he's the top-rated defensive player, period, in the country per PFF, which is pretty impressive. And we've talked plenty about how great he's been. Isaiah Bucks just had a 3-sack game, so I think he might be doing all right. And Raekwon, Matt Zenitz had a good piece on AL.com. I think it was Zenitz. One of the AL.com beat writers had up a piece yesterday that was kind of like season review, like scuttlebutt from inside the program, general thoughts so far. It was a really good piece, and one of them was there was a note in there that was saying that like the feeling around the Alabama football building is that Raekwon has played really well. Like even though the splash plays and the stats haven't shown up, that Raekwon has been drawing a lot of double teams and has played really, really well regardless. So and that kind of like when we talked about Raekwon before, I think that kind of lined up with my perceptions of him. I think so. Yeah, I mean, like the top 3 guys in particular, and you've seen a bit here and there from like Johnny Dwight had a good game on Saturday.
I'm happy to see Johnny Dwight back. Yeah. Back and playing well. Like they do need to develop that depth. Hey, Brian Ray hasn't really made much of an impact. I was kind of thinking that he might be a player for them this year, and he still might be, but there hasn't been a ton there, I guess.
Yeah.
But I'm really, really pleased with where the 3 starters are at.
Yeah, you haven't seen really any like splash plays from the second tier guys, like to the point where none of them have really stood out so far. Like you couldn't really name one of those guys that was like, oh, I think that guy's having a really great year. But the top 3 have played so well, and the guys they've been rotating in have played well enough that I can't be like, oh, this one's not doing great. Like the backups have been capable when they've been in. The backups have been as good as they have needed them to be so far.
And I thought, and to sort of expand just a little bit beyond the defensive line, I thought Anthony Jennings had maybe his best game against A&M. I thought he looked really good. So I'm happy. Like there's a bit of a concern with the inside linebackers, but I'm generally happy with the front 7. There was the question about whether like playing other guys at edge, like Anoma. Anoma's not going to play on standard down, so that's we sort of like can just sort of like forget that for a minute. Just because he's just not ready, I think. Like not that the idea of playing him more is not a good one, but I just don't think he's ready to play on standard down. So the question then is he would you play him on passing downs more? And first, like maybe Alabama doesn't have the pass rush specialist that it had in the past, but I still think that they're getting some pretty good pass rush from a lot of guys. And also I was thinking about this too. Alabama hasn't really in the past, to my knowledge, use those freshmen in like a pass rush specialist role in the way that we might have anticipated. Like I think back to like 2014 and Rashaan Evans and thinking that like, okay, well, like Alabama doesn't have like that natural like freak edge rush player. Like maybe they should get Rashaan in on third down some. And they didn't really do that year.
It seems like most of the snaps Anoma has gotten this year have been just kind of pure backup rather than rush specialist.
Yeah. And go ahead.
I was just saying, like, and they haven't really needed it, I don't think. Like, they're up to 16 sacks, 16 sacks this year, which is actually more than the 2016 team had through this many games.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
I mean, part of that's coming, getting 7 against Texas A&M,
Right.
but they're really not lacking in terms of the top guys. Like we talked about this, like third down, like passing downs, edge rush is like they have plenty of guys who can do that. Like they really don't have a need for the kind of role that Anoma is best suited to fill right now.
Yeah. So let me just go back. Singapore Slang, just a couple more questions. He said, how do you think Tua's production on offense affects the opposing offense? Are they abandoning the run earlier, slowing the game down, hold on to possession, try to score more frequently? The cop-out answer is that it probably depends on the opponent. There's probably not one catch-all solution. I think that, generally speaking, the idea of slowing the game down and limiting the possessions, that's not really a winning strategy against Alabama, because if you just try to like keep the clock moving, run the ball, limit the possessions, that's not really going to work against Alabama, because you just can't run the ball well enough to do that consistently. And if you do that, you're kind of like I think you're kind of playing into their hand. So, we know generally that you have to throw the ball to win against Alabama. And as far as what changes maybe with, Tua specifically, but generally just the fact that the Alabama offense is so good and so explosive, is that you can't have like you can't have like a field position approach to the game anymore, right? Like you play Bama and you got to score. Like last year in the playoff, Georgia and Clemson went into those playoff games, and they were probably thinking, if we get in the mid-20s, we got a really good chance to win this game. But there's no team in the country that can think anymore going into a game against Alabama that if they get into the mid-20s, there's a really good chance they're going to win the game. Because even if they get in the mid-30s, there's a very good chance that they're not going to win the game. So I think that maybe, you still got to throw the ball, I guess. One of the real interesting things to me to sort of map this onto reality in terms of an actual game is LSU. Does LSU come out and try to throw the ball around against Alabama and say, we because notoriously they've played that game very conservatively.
Yeah.
Except for the 2 years with Mettenberger where they turned him loose. But other than that, like they've played those games very conservatively. I wonder how, if in terms of their preparation for the game and thinking about how to manage the game, I wonder what they realistically think they need to score to win.
I mean, you gotta figure you're trying to get into the 40s at least, right?
Yeah, maybe, but they can't though. That's the thing. Like, there's no way that LSU is getting into the 40s, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, no, they're not going to. But I mean, are you going to expect to shut down this offense? Are you going to expect to be the team that, limits a Tua-led Alabama offense to 21, 24 points? Like, I mean, maybe that's the only chance you've got to be those guys, but good luck.
Now, if you're another team, if you're an Auburn or a Clemson or an Ohio State or Georgia with a team with a good better established quarterback, you're going to come out and you're going to throw the ball, right? And you're going to throw the ball. You're going to be trying to score, and you're not going to get conservative. Like if you get the lead, like you got to keep slinging it. So
yeah,
I think like last year in the national championship game, Georgia kind of tried to take the air out of the football a little bit late in that game and just try to run out the clock. Nobody's going to do that anymore against Alabama. I think that's maybe the biggest way in which the strategy changes. There's no more just sort of conservative trust your defense against Alabama. There's just score. Because if you don't do that, you're probably not going to win. And then the last question is, do you think Clemson starting Trevor Lawrence is more or less a response to Tua? Seeing that you'll need a prolific offense to keep up with Alabama and Ohio State. In a roundabout way, yeah, right?
Yeah, I think it's I think you could definitely see where the decision might have been influenced by Alabama, right? Like you can see what going from a quarterback like Jalen / it's weird how close the parallels are between the quarterbacks there. Going from a quarterback like Jalen or Kelly Bryant to a quarterback like Tua or Trevor Lawrence, what that does to your offense.
Right.
And it may be, I would probably say it's less a response to Alabama in particular than just a move for the future in general. Like it's so obvious that Lawrence is a much better quarterback and that he unlocks so much more for that offense. And so even if you don't think, because Lawrence is not like the A&M game, he kind of had some freshman moments. Yeah. And so I think the idea is that you go all in on his future. Now. Yeah. And even if he's not there by the time the playoffs come, then he's there next year.
Right. Mitch, what do you think? Where do you come down on just to answering that question specifically, or just general thoughts on that? Because it definitely is like a huge story.
Like, so I sort of wish that we could look at this in a reality where Tua over Jalen had not happened. Like does just the idea of taking a freshman and having him start over somebody who took you to the playoff with experience, like just that I mean, that has to like there had to have been Clemson fans that were like, yeah, like why are we not starting Trevor Lawrence? Because it worked for Alabama, it'll work for us. Yeah,
and especially after you saw like the sort of limiting effect that Kelly Bryant had on their offense last year against Alabama, right? Like they were, in similar issues to what Alabama had under Jalen. In that game, Clemson was kind of confined for most of the game to a very small area of the field in part because of Kelly Bryant's limitations. And it's hard. It's very hard to beat Alabama, right? When you have, or beat an elite defense when you're dealing with that. I think Carter brings up an interesting point too. Trevor Lawrence hasn't been unbelievable this year. I mean, that's to be expected. He's just a true freshman, but he hasn't. That Clemson game, like he was okay. There was a reason why he wasn't the one on the field for most of the second half. There was a reason why it was Kelly Bryant on the field for most of the second half. And Dabo, there were some people criticizing Dabo, saying like, just dumping this on Kelly Bryant at the last second and not giving him any time. But I think you could even make the case that Dabo should have waited a little bit longer on this. And
I mean, I don't think you could. If you have him, the difference in this situation for Clemson is that Bryant is a senior. And so if he loses this year of eligibility, if he had played in a fifth game, he's done as a college player. So I think you had to let him, if this was what you were going to do, and this was always what was going to happen, like you had to do it this week, because you couldn't, if you dither around a week longer and you let Bryant use up his final year of eligibility, then
I totally agree with that. What I guess I meant is that if Dabo was only concerned with Clemson football, then you could argue that he shouldn't have made this move. And I almost say that in my opinion, he deserves a ton of credit for really, I think, I would say deliberately hurting his program a little bit in order to do right by his player. Is that too much credit?
It might be too much credit, but I do think it's worth pointing out that, I mean, because like, yeah, it hurt, but like that would be a cold-blooded move to like knowing that he's not going to be your starter going forward, but just saying, I got to have a good backup quarterback and continuing to play him solely and burning up the rest of his eligibility solely that you can have a good backup quarterback this season.
But it would be so easy to justify it, right? Because they've only played one competitive game this year, and it was Kelly Bryant, not Trevor Lawrence, that was on the field at the end of that game. You know, for like the last like whole bunch of possessions, it was Kelly Bryant. So, you know, you go ahead, Mitch. Sorry.
I was going to say the counter to like that being the right move for Clemson, I think, is come playoff time. If you haven't been playing Trevor, like if you haven't, like to me, it was clear that Trevor Lawrence was going to take over sooner rather than later because he was getting primetime snaps against Texas A&M.
Right.
Like that was something we never saw from Tua last year. He was always getting backup slops, you know, snaps against Vanderbilt and stuff. So like they clearly wanted to get him ready either to start sooner or start later in the season when they start playing teams where they're going to need him over Kelly Bryant.
And now, like, who can you even? I mean, the ACC is bad.
Yeah, like their next 4 games are
bad.
Wake Forest, NC State, Florida State, Louisville, Boston College. Duke is their highest ranked team remaining on their schedule right now.
Yeah, BC was looking like that, or I think Clemson's home for BC, but before last week, BC was looking like it could be a little bit of a challenge, and BC did not look good on Saturday. So even that's not looking like a good matchup. Yeah, they don't have a lot of losses in there.
But I would say, like, to your point, I think it's worth pointing out that he has put Clemson kind of a tough situation now because they're, I mean, if Lawrence goes down, they're in bad shape.
They don't have a backup quarterback.
Yeah.
They got Hunter Renfrew's like the 3rd string now, I thought I read, or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
That's not, that's not an enviable position to be in. Alabama's really quite lucky. I mean, they're really, really lucky that Jalen's staying. Just as a quick aside, or a related aside, people are giving him a lot of credit for staying, which I understand. Like, I understand the sentiment, but it bothers me because giving Jalen credit for staying implies that you would find it to be bad if he left, right? Isn't that's the implication that I read into that.
Yeah. It's weird to me. Like I saw some things where I won't name, but like a former player who has a moderately sized following talked about, like, so good to see this, like a guy making a team first decision. I was like, Jesus. Yeah. And it's like, and I do give Jalen credit for staying, because this is such an unprecedented and such a weird situation. That, like, I don't know. I guess like from my perspective, he gets a lot of credit for staying because going seems like such the logical decision to make. But I definitely think there are a lot of people who are coming at it from the perspective like, this is what he should do, and
that's the right decision.
This is the correct decision. Yeah.
And it's not. It's a decision, right? It's one of the 2 decisions that he had, and he's, I don't know. I'm very happy that Jalen is still with the Alabama football program. And obviously this has been covered a lot, but he is. It's interesting, like him and Kelly Bryant both may be free agents after this year. Like, that's.
God, I hope he doesn't go to Auburn. I so hope he doesn't go to Auburn.
I wouldn't like Kelly Bryant in Auburn.
Kelly Bryant. What do you guys think, Kelly Bryant? I mean, he can play a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I mean, not. Is he better than Jalen? Where do you guys come down on that? No.
Last year, I probably would have said he was a bit of a better passer than Jalen was. Jalen looks like the little Danny Enos work looks like it's paying off. Which might be another part of it. Like, this might be overblown, but I have seen some people make the suggestion, and some of it's Alabama fans being the like Alabama exceptionals who are like, why shouldn't he want to stay and be at the best program in the country? But like, I think there's something to that, like Dan Enos is a really good quarterback coach. And I loved, like we talked before, and people have said this, but like I loved what he did with the Arkansas quarterbacks when he was there. And it's hard to quantify what impact he might have had on Tua, and maybe not as hard, but you can't put it all on him because who knows what is contributing to what. But it does seem like Jalen has really taken steps forward as a passer this year, and some of that may be the lower pressure. There could be any number of things that factor, but it would not surprise me if Enos had a significant effect on that. And so, I don't want to play into the too much like he, stay at the best program in the country with the best players, the best competition, blah, 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 blah. Like that's way over the top in my opinion. But I do think there is something to wanting to stay this year under a quarterback coach as good as Dan Enos.
Yeah.
And probably worth mentioning, like I think Gary said on the broadcast that he was still getting like half of the reps in practice.
Really? Half of the first team reps. Interesting.
Yeah. Where he was, most guys that are like Tua first team get like 70%, but they were still giving Jalen like 50, which like for Tua, like does he even really need 20% more? Like
judging by the results so far, 50% is plenty.
He could probably sit out the rest of the year and come in the national championship game.
We've seen him do it. Yeah, I feel like we've seen that before. I wanted to talk quickly. I'm excited about the secondary. We've talked about being excited about the safeties. We talked last week about being excited about Trayvon Diggs. I'm getting excited about Pat Surtain now.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty bullish on the secondary. What do you guys think?
They're good. They're really good. I mean, what this guy, like I retweeted this earlier in the day, but that CFB film room account tweeted that like, what's the opponents have completed like 5 of 21 passes targeting him.
Yeah.
Had a great interception on Saturday.
And I think he's gotten better each game.
Yep. Yeah. This was definitely his best game so far.
He, and I thought like, Saban has always, I read this quote a while ago where basically Saban talked about a game where like, it's halftime and things are going against you and you're giving up plays in the passing game. You're not playing well. And sometimes the only thing that you can do is just play cover one, play press man, and just let your guys play. And like in the second, like clearly there was some frustration about the defensive performance in the first half because in the second half, Alabama came out and played just like a whole bunch of man. It's played man basically the entire third quarter. And there was always an extra blitzer, usually a defensive back, sometimes a linebacker. And that's just what they did the whole quarter. And they were great. I mean, I feel like this has a chance to be such a good man-to-man team because you've got two good corners on the edges, and you've got both safeties who can play man coverage on slot receivers. So that gives you a lot of flexibility and in terms of the adaptability of your coverages and in terms of sending different guys on blitzes. Like, Alabama loves to send that slot corner on a blitz. Well, it makes it a lot easier to do that when your safety can come down and play man on the slot receiver. So I feel like it's a very good man team. And I know that Saban doesn't really want to play man. Like he wants to be playing his cover 3, or he wants to be playing cover 6, or he wants to be playing quarters. Like that's just who he is. That's, those are like the cover 3 is literally like his brainchild, and like he's going to want to use it for the rest of his coaching career. So like, and because you saw like he's playing a lot of zone in the first half. Then he says, "Fuck this, I'm playing man" in the third quarter, and then in the fourth quarter, as soon as the lead's comfortable, he's right back to zone. So like Saban, like he wants to play zone, and like I get it, like I really do, but it's nice that he has that in his back pocket this year, maybe even more so than a lot of past years. That I think that he's just going to be able to say, if things aren't going great, I'm just going to line up. I'm going to play single high safety. I'm going to play man across the board. And I trust my guys to lock up.
I mean, this is the first year they've ever had where their two primary outside corners are as big a dudes as like, even for Alabama, who can get as like just about more of the physical prototype guys than anyone, having two guys that are 6'2", 200 pounds playing corner, that's not an easy
like one at a time.
Say that again, Mitch. I'm sorry, I didn't.
It's like they've always had them one at a time.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? Like, you know, maybe not this year because it's their first, it's both of their first year starting, and for Pat Surtain it's his first year, but like next year it could be Alabama's best corner duo ever potentially, right? What is,
and like if Trayvon is back next year, and I would assume right now that he's going to be, if he has a great year, you know,
yeah,
the junior, like it's a possibility for sure.
True.
If they're both back next year, good luck throwing the ball on Alabama.
What is right now the best corner combo Saban's had at Alabama?
2016, Marlon and Anthony Averett.
Yeah. That's good. 2009, Kareem and Marquise. Not bad. Dre Kirkpatrick and Milner never really matched up quite. Like they were both so good, but they never really were so great in the same year.
They didn't have them being like the two primary outside corners and being sort of dominant guys at the same time. No,
because in 2010 Milner was playing a lot of star, and they had Menzie outside. Now Menzie and Menzie was really good. He had a really great year in 2011.
Yeah.
So maybe him and Dre Kirkpatrick, but certainly from a talent standpoint, I would say that it's 2016. I totally agree with that. I think it's Marlon and Anthony Averett. I think these guys could be better, definitely better.
Yeah.
I think each one could be better than the other one. I think Pat Surtain could possibly be better than Marlon, and I think that Trayvon Diggs can be better than Anthony Averett. Like I mean
this might be a little hyperbolic, but like, you know, 4 games into his career, but like given the pedigree and the traits and how well he's playing 4 games into his career,
best corner Saban's ever had.
Yeah, like I think you wouldn't say that now. Like you know, anything can happen in years, but like that trajectory is such an easy one to see for him.
Who is it currently? Give me base it just on that player at his best. So because this gets confusing when we talk about it in like the player's entire career, because like they had some, you know, down years, whatever, but like just base it on like who's Alabama's best corner taking each player at their best, like in their best year.
D. Milner in 2012.
What about you, Mitch?
I might take Marlon in 2016.
Interesting. I would probably take Milner too. I feel like it's sort of apples to oranges, because the 2016 team like was way more challenged through the air than the 2012 team was. But like even in those games where teams were throwing the ball on them, like LSU in 2012 or A&M, Milner was great. Milner was so good. He was so good. And then like he in 2012 against A&M, because they didn't have anybody to play star, and he moved over to play star in that game, just like seamlessly transitioned there the week after LSU. Milner would probably be my answer, but I totally think there's a good case for Marlon. But I agree. I think that Surtain definitely has that potential for sure.
And it's like exciting with these corners to pair with these safeties who are a pretty good pair themselves.
Yeah, I obviously, like, so much is made about Deontay Thompson, but
Xavier McKinney's really good.
Yeah, he's really good too. He's really good in the box, which we kind of knew, right? Like, I feel like that was sort of his reputation. We hadn't obviously seen him play really, but I feel like that was his reputation coming into the year. But he's a good coverage player. Like I was talking before about how the safeties can play man, and like he to my eye is pretty good when he has to play man on a slot receiver. He holds up in quarters pretty well. I'm really, really happy with where he is as well. So the secondary is really good. Like, I'm actually not worried about the secondary.
No, not at all. I have, zero concerns about the secondary. They're elite. They might be the best secondary in the country.
I feel great. Like I don't even. What's the biggest weakness of the team? This is sort of a good place to wrap it up. And we also said that we would focus on negatives this week because of saving. So what's the biggest? What's your biggest? Or let me frame the question differently. What thing, if you had to choose one thing, one aspect of the team, and that's broad, so you can sort of take it wherever you want. But what aspect of the team would you be most concerned is going to impact them in a significant way? So not like right now, like the punting situation is probably the worst part of the team, but we're not really concerned about that. That's going to have like a hugely significant impact to like drag the team down. So give me your area of concern that in terms of the potential impact on the team.
Maybe like the only path I see for a team to seriously threaten this Alabama team is if like it's a team with a really, really good offensive line that can kind of play to a neutral battle against the front and leaves it to where the inside linebackers need to make a lot of plays. And if Mac and Dylan don't continue to get better, and if Mac's foot deteriorates or something like that, like I could see an area where Alabama's inside linebackers kind of being a step slow on outside runs and short passes. Like that's one place where I could see an offense potentially having consistent success against Alabama.
Mitch, what about you?
I think about, I try to think of like a team that I think could exploit this. And like, I feel like Ohio State is going to be, if there is a potential like fatal flaw for this team, it would have to be, and I guess I would probably say the offensive line against their defensive line potentially.
The Alabama's offensive line
against Alabama's offensive line.
Like I definitely thought about saying like the right side of the offensive line if they don't continue to get better, but like, and granted they haven't seen a lot of like dominant defensive line. They certainly haven't seen one level of Auburn or Clemson or Ohio State yet, but like, man, they've been great pass blocking so far, and and Tua is so good in the pocket. I just don't like. Even if they stay at the level they are, I don't think the mismatch between an Alabama offensive line and the Auburn, Clemson, Ohio State defensive lines, I don't think the mismatch is big enough for those defensive lines to really control the game.
Yeah, it's just like if we're talking about purely the potential for impact, I feel like it's hard for me to pick something on defense given how dominant this offense is. Like, there could be, fatal flaws on this defense, but the offense is still probably going to score 40 or 50. So is it a 40 or 50 point flaw on the defense that is going to, greatly impact this team?
Right. Yeah. I guess that's a good way to, I wasn't even necessarily intending the question that way, but that's a good way to look at it. Like, if they're going to lose a game, what aspects of the team are you predicting would be most at fault? Which I think is sort of the way that you answer. And I guess, Carter, that's sort of the way you answered the question too, in terms of like, yeah. So I like both of those answers. I do. But you know what? I don't think that either of those things is
no. I mean, stretch. Like both of those are a stretch.
And I mean, like field goal kicking, like obviously is like an obvious answer too, but like I don't think that's ever going to matter either. Like,
and Bullivus is 4 of 5 so far. Like, and he hasn't missed an extra point. So like, a lot of people were like, "Oh, I mean," and I've made plenty of kicker jokes this year. Like, I think you have to make jokes when you miss 3 extra points, but like, like the jury is still out on Joseph Bullivus as the primary kicker. So like that could turn out to not be that much of a weakness.
Yeah. He did shank one out of bounds on a kickoff, but
yeah.
It happens.
The Tua injury is probably still like that's probably top of the list. Like, but the great news is that they're doing a good job protecting him. So you know, which I mean, quarterback injuries are such a freak thing. So like, I don't know, like if you could say like one quarterback is particularly at risk relative to like the average quarterback. So it's all just sort of like fluky. So but you know, hopefully he doesn't get hurt. I guess is all you could say. They, you know, just one last thing, and I guess I know we kind of got to wrap it up. They throw the ball outside the numbers a lot. Like they must have thrown in this game against A&M. They must have thrown like close to a dozen corner routes, mostly or all maybe to Judy or to Irv Smith. Like, and I was looking at like Tua's chart earlier. There is very, very, very few attempts between the numbers greater than 15 yards down the field.
Yeah.
So and most of the ones that are like seam routes, you know, to Irv or something. We haven't seen very many like in-breaking routes, especially deeper in-breaking routes, like very, very few post routes coming from the outsides. And you know, so I think it's a good thing, right? Because I'm looking at like, okay, like, you know, they're still not even really attacking like the whole field yet. They're still sort of concentrating the offense in smaller areas. And you can even see these games where, you know, they'll take one thing that was like super successful in the first couple games of the season, which is a lot of these like RPO based quick slants. And then they've run so few of those the past 2 weeks. And just the offense has still been amazing. So it's like, you know, there is just so many different ways that they can attack you, and they'll do some of them one week and then they'll do different stuff another week. And then I think there's still so much stuff that's yet to be unlocked.
They're trying everything out and basically only putting a game's worth of tape for anything that they've done. And that's going to drive opposing defensive coaches crazy as much as anything.
I think you're going to see a massive expansion of the vertical passing game by the time the season's over. And you're going to see so many different stress points beyond 15 yards, because right now you're just not seeing that. Like you're just seeing so many outside breaking routes, mostly from Irv Smith and Judy. And there's just so much room to expand that out. So I'm like so excited for this team. Like I don't know. There's sky's the limit, right? There's nothing else to say.
All right, we're gonna wrap it up. So I won't bother with score predictions necessarily.
Cover.
Yeah. Do they cover the 48.5? I think it's what the line is at right now.
Where did it open? Didn't it open over 50 or something crazy
50,
like that?
54 or something, 54 and a half.
So many points.
Yeah.
So many points.
I will go ahead and say it's the biggest spread between FBS teams in like 5 years.
Can you just tell me something about Louisiana Lafayette besides that Billy Napier is their coach? Because I don't know shit about that.
So
they're just, I mean, they run a kind of generic spreadish offense that's more reliant on the run than the pass, basically.
Okay.
And I don't know, the backs are okay, but the quarterback's not great, which is why I'm going to go ahead and say cover, just because I think this is a real chance that this is a team that Alabama just, you know, that they post a shutout. So I could easily see this one being like 51-52-0.
They lost at home to Coastal Carolina. Is Coastal Carolina good?
Decent, I think. Not terrible.
Okay. Cover.
Like, this is definitely the worst team. They're a good deal worse than Arkansas State.
Yeah, I'm trying to find I wish I knew what they were according to S&P or something.
It's
they're
interesting trying to project these things because it's like we know 100% they would cover if Tua was out there playing. Like even just if we knew he was playing 3 quarters.
Yeah.
He would cover.
That's really the interesting thing, right? Is they have all these stats, but Tua's they have all these incredible offensive numbers, but Tua's barely played.
2.5 quarters.
So ULL is 99th in S&P Plus. The S&P Plus projection for this game,
that's what I was going to ask next,
is 60-14. So S&P Plus doesn't have Alabama covering, but by less than a field goal.
They also have them scoring 2 touchdowns. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
So wait, does that mean that is their offense rated decently? If Bill's giving them 2 touchdowns against Alabama, do they have a pretty decent offense?
I didn't think so, but I haven't actually looked at their.
I wonder if just in paycheck games, it's just you'll probably get about 10 points and.
Yeah, that's true, right? Most of these games aren't shutouts, just as a function of the
third string.
Right.
Yeah, as a function of the amount of garbage time.
A whole bunch of backups in and stuff.
I'm gonna say not covered just because I expect there to be a lot of garbage time stuff this week. I think the spread's right on.
And I'll say not cover 2. I'll say that this could be a big Mac Jones game. My man might play a whole quarter or something. So okay, and let me say this. Okay, last question, and then we'll wrap it up. Over under 5.5 series for Tua.
6.
Did I set that at a good spot? I was okay because I was deciding between that and 6.5, but I feel
because it could easily be 5 series with 5 touchdowns. And
that's
then you
what
pull
I was thinking.
right?
Exactly. Right. That was my thinking exactly. That at 35 would be where they would yank him. Yeah. So okay. So over under 5.5.
I'll take the over.
I'll
take the under, but I'm taking that it's 5.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely right. If it's under, it's 5. I'm gonna take the over 2, and I'll take the over at 6. So yeah, it's kind of right on that point. Because it's probably either 5 or 6. He's not gonna play only 4.
Yeah, no.
And 7 would be the absolute upper limit of how much he would play. So it's probably either 5 or 6. And so I'll go 6.
All right. Well, I think that's it for this week. Hope for no injuries. I think that's the biggest thing we're going to say for the next couple of games because Arkansas is so bad.
Arkansas. By the way, totally agree with your early game kickoff tweets.
Yeah, right.
Why would you not want that? Let me just. I don't want a 7 o'clock kickoff so it goes up against Ohio State and Penn State or something. This week. Give me the early games.
Just chill to watch in the morning.
That's right. Yeah, give me something to watch in the morning. So yeah, I'm with you, 100%. 100%.
All right. Well, that's it for this week. Roll Tide, and we'll see y'all later.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.